As filmmakers and editors, we definitely have access to a lot of information about the tools within our softwares of editing. But trust me, there are some of the tools that are overlooked even though they are used, but they are not as used as much as they're supposed to be used. And that's something that we're going to look at right here in this video. And as you probably may know by the title of this video, we're going to look at how to use keyframes, simple keyframes in Premiere Pro to up the performance of our editing and to give our videos a touch of quality. In this particular video, we're going to focus on just the motion effects, where we are going to use some keyframes to simulate camera movement as well as scale up to, crop out some parts of a particular frame or shot that we may not want in our frame. So let's get right into it. This is my editing software of choice, Premiere Pro. That's what I use for all my video editing, music videos, commercial videos, everything. And you can equally do this as well in other softwares like Final Cut Pro and the others. So whatever that you feel comfortable working with, you can just as well perform what we're going to do right here in Premiere Pro. On this timeline, this is a video that I have actually uploaded onto my YouTube channel. So if you haven't seen it, I'm going to link it up right over there in the right top corner, so you take a look at it so you can experience the touch of quality that keyframes can actually give your videos. Because I mounted my camera on my tripod for the most part of all the shots that I took for this B-roll sequence, I had to use motion to actually emulate camera movement in the video. So how best can we do this? We can always resort to motion effects. That's where we're going to use some keyframes to do all that. So if you notice, if I click any shot or any clip that I use keyframes, like this one's for instance, you're going to notice all these keyframes over here, this, that, and that. All right, so what these are doing is that they are controlling the motion over here. So what essentially happens is that you notice that the scale is selected, and as I hover or as I move the playhead all the way to the last end, you notice that these numbers are actually changing, the values are changing, and that's because and that's because the keyframes have different values in the interval all the way to the last keyframe, and that's essentially what gives us the motion that we've set for the video. Similarly, there's motion in this shot as well, where you notice that I have rotation selected, where rotation moves from here all the way to there, as well as scale, which we're going to dive into deeply in this video so that we can understand it best as well. All right, so let's look at the clips and see how best that we can use keyframes to emulate camera movement as well as to give it some visual pleasure to our audience. All right, so this is the first clip that I'm going to begin with. This particular shot is so still and motionless. This is so still and very boring. Fine, you could tell that what gives it much interest is probably the environment and what is happening in the shot, but it's not as interesting as I would want it to be. So what we're going to essentially do is that this shot is already scaled up, all right, and the reason being that I decided to push it all in to avoid some parts of the shot. All right, so for instance over here I decided to take this part out of the shot and to give it a close-up, detailed shot, because I want to see how much the condensation is happening right down the can. All right, and this frame is just perfect for me. But we are not done yet. What we've done essentially is just to scale by using the motion over here. Basically, there's no motion in here, there's no animation, and that's what we are going to create to give the illusion or to emulate camera movement. All right, so what we are going to simply do is that we're going to make sure that our playhead is all the way to the left, or you could even keep it over here a little bit this way. We can always shift the keyframe all the way to the left or wherever you want it to be. Because I've already set my scale, I'm going to simply hit this toggle animation right over there, and that's automatically going to create my first keyframe for me. So the next thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to move it all the way to somewhere in the middle and hit this add or remove keyframe icon, and once I hit it, I have another keyframe selected. But what you notice is that there's no animation in there, and that's because I didn't alter these values or this value. All right, so let's just make that change. So you can simply hit this particular key to go to the next keyframe, and it sends you right to the next. And if you want to go to the previous keyframe, you hit this likewise. All right, and that's exactly that. So what we're going to change is this particular keyframe's value to something different, either to zoom in or to zoom out. Right, so because you already zoomed in to the framing that we prefer, we are just going to have the playhead right on top of this particular keyframe. Then you're going to change the value. All right, okay, like this. So we moved from 148 all the way to 177, and just with this you can notice a huge difference in the shot. All right, so what you notice is that once it gets to the last keyframe, it ends, and that's because that's where we've actually put the keyframe. I'm going to love to have my last keyframe all the way to the last end of my clip, and that's going to give me a smooth flow from the first keyframe all the way to the last, and that actually zooms in the shot. And because the can is rotating on a rotating disc, it is given much more motion and much more visual interest, and that makes it even better than before. All right, so let's look at before and after. All right, the next clip is going to be something much more different, because here I already gave some camera movement to this particular shot. It already has a zoom out camera movement to its properties. So what we are going to do over here is to create the illusion of the background to make it look as if the background is pulling towards the camera and the subject is still where she is. All right, it's kind of confusing, and that's what simply can be termed as zolly, which is a combination of using a dolly and zoom all at the same time. This can be achieved with using a camera, and as you push the camera forward, you zoom out or you zoom in, depending on either you're pushing the camera forward or pulling it backwards. So let's create that with using keyframes to emulate that sense of camera movement. All right, okay, so because we already have a zoom out, what we are simply going to do is likewise going to create our keyframes. So we're going to hit my first keyframe over here, and as you notice, there's a zoom out. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in like that by increasing the scale, and let's look at how the shot turns out to be. So this is what actually happens with just two keyframes, and you notice that there's a huge difference in the shot. All right, so it gives you the illusion of the background being pulled towards the camera, but the subject still in the same size, giving that illusion that the subject is still, but it's just the background moving towards the camera, and that is just exceptional. With just two keyframes, we're able to achieve this look. So equally, let us look at before and after. Okay, finally, our last shot of the day of this tutorial. There's another camera movement where the camera is being moved across the shot and the subject is maintained in the middle or in the center of the frame. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to equally zoom in into this shot, but there's going to be something different over here that we are going to perform, because the headroom that we have over here is not as big as we would want. Because if we scale in, this is what you're going to notice. We're going to notice that our subject is going to hit the top of the frame, and we're going to use keyframes again to change the properties and maintain our subject still having enough headroom in the shot. So I'm going to hit Ctrl+Z to revert back to the settings, and we're going to start with, of course, our first keyframe, which is the scale. All right, and all the way to anywhere we can just push all the way, pull the shot towards the camera. Maybe this is just fine for us, and yeah, all the way to the last end of the clip. All right, so let's just play and see how it looks like. All right, so this already looks good, but the only problem that we are facing right now is that our subject is losing her headroom and even cutting the top of her head off out of the frame. All right, and that's what we are going to essentially change. All right, so what is going to happen over here is that we're going to use position as our solution to maintain an equal headroom all the way to the last end of the clip. All right, so what we're going to do over here is just to hit position and make sure that we hit it all the way, the keyframe all the way to the left, so that we have a fresh start like we have with the scale. And with this value, you're going to push it all the way to the right to bring the frame downwards and maintain a headroom of this size by the time we hit the end of the clip. All right, so let's look at the shots and see if we've been able to change something or we've been able to solve that problem. All right, so what you notice over here is that we are maintaining our headroom from the beginning of the shot to the last end of this clip. And that's simply how you can use keyframes to emulate camera movements to bring visual interest in your shots. So this actually brings us to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and turn on the post notification button to be always notified of future videos such as this, such as tutorials, such as interviews with creatives, such as behind the scenes of my music videos or my video productions and my photography. All the things that you guys long for in filmmaking and photography, that's what we do over here on my YouTube channel. And on that note, have a wonderful day. See ya.